We know that AI helps us work faster and more efficiently, but what if it could also help us live longer, healthier lives? We want to introduce you to Interconnected, a fascinating new podcast about the tech behind the tech. This week, they dive into the revolution that AI is bringing to medicine. In episode 2, world-renowned cardiologist Dr. Eric Topol and decentralized pioneer Jim Nasser explain how AI is enhancing disease prevention, supercharging personalized care, and giving patients control of their data. Listen to Interconnected today, wherever you get your podcasts.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We're coming to you live from our massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it is Aaron for a quick introduction, and it is that time. It is time for AI and Cloud News of the Month. Unfortunately for this recording, I wasn't able to make it with the day job. I had a bunch of stuff. I was traveling out in California, doing a bunch of social media and analysts and press and stuff like that. But I am back, and quick kind of heads up for everyone as well. As we're approaching conference season, I will be at NVIDIA GTC in DC at the end of the month. Looking to fill up my schedule. If anybody is interested in connecting, please let me know. It's looking like I may be at Ignite as well as reInvent this year, but not 100% sure on that one. So I'll keep everyone informed as we progress a little further into conference season. With that quick programming note out of the way, again, it is Brandon, as always, for our cloud news. At this point, I definitely would say he is not just guest host, but our definitive cloud news host. I think he's been on more than I have at this point, but certainly thank him for his time. And with that, I certainly hope everyone enjoys this cloud news, and that's coming up right after this quick break.
Today's show is brought to you by TestCube. Testing applications in Kubernetes doesn't have to be complicated. TestCube is your go-to platform for cloud-native continuous testing. With TestCube, you can orchestrate, scale, and automate tests effortlessly right within Kubernetes, catching issues early and deploying with confidence. Try it out today and see why engineering teams trust TestCube to keep their testing simple and scalable. Your test, your tools, your infrastructure, finally together. Check it out at testcube.io/cloudcast. And we're back. And folks, it is great to be back again with you with the monthly AI and Cloud News of the Month. Back with the great Brandon Whichard from Software Defined Talk. Brandon, it's just you and I today. Aaron is abandoned us. He's off doing some sort of, real job work thing out in California. But good to have you back, man. How you been?
I've been fantastic, Brian. And, the thing we force these listeners to talk to is a few minutes of college football, right?
Absolutely.
And the thought I had this week is what happens in college football. There's a preseason rankings, then the season happens, and there's always like teams out of nowhere. We weren't thinking about them. No one thought they were going to be good. Boom. They jump up in the rankings. And I think that's where we start this week. I feel like in the world of cloud, what happened was we had Oracle like kind of off the radar a little bit, kind of unranked, maybe like way down, others receiving votes.
Right.
And out of nowhere in September, it's like they vaunted up. They're like maybe like the top 2 cloud providers suddenly with this incredible, hard to understand, not sure if it's real, but looks like incredible potential with their $300 billion deal with OpenAI. So I think we need to start there. And I've been waiting. I want to get your take. What do we make of this number and of this deal?
Well, I think the reality is we no longer really live in a reality. We no longer have truth. We no longer apparently can trust any media. Apparently you can announce anything you want to. It is a crazy time. I think we ended the last show. We ended the one we covered August, which would have been, roughly September 1st. And I remember I just sort of squeezed it in at the end. I said, hey, did you guys notice that Larry Ellison just became like the richest man in America? And that was before this number was announced. And this was also announced. This was also before, I think it was today or yesterday. They basically announced that whatever US-China agreement is with TikTok, that Oracle gets to sort of, have some sort of involvement with that. So this is beating Alabama and Georgia and Michigan in the same year. just completely came from out of nowhere. I mean, this is a transfer portal kid winning the Heisman Trophy. I mean, throw whatever superlative you want. Yeah, this came completely out of nowhere. I'm shocked.
I guess the other part we could throw into it that came out this month is that NVIDIA has agreed to invest $100 billion in OpenAI. So just to draw the triangle out for everyone, OpenAI has agreed to pay Oracle $300 billion over some period of time, 5 years, say.
Right.
Oracle will eventually have to build the data center that doesn't exist yet to service such demand. And they will likely have to then go buy a lot of chips from NVIDIA to then, put inside the data center. So it's like you have NVIDIA giving the money to OpenAI then promising to giving the money to Oracle, and then Oracle coming back and buying the money from NVIDIA, which seems to be like everyone on social media is making the same joke, like, round tripping. I don't know, whatever you would call it. Is this, so is there any, I guess you answered it before. It's sort of like, we don't live in reality, but I guess I wanted to throw out, it's like, there was a recent interview, and maybe we can drop a link in the show notes with Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA. I think it was on the BG2 podcast. So, it's like, we don't have to guess. Like they ask him straight up, and he just says, OpenAI is going to be the next multi-trillion-dollar company. And he says it with the conviction of like Jensen Huang, right? Just sort of like, it is going to happen. So I think in his mind, it's just sort of like, this is a great deal. We put in 100 billion now. They're worth like 500 billion, say, or whatever, pick some arbitrary number. And he feels like they're going to be worth whatever, 3+ trillion in the future. So I guess when you follow the logic, it makes sense if you have the conviction that I guess he has. And I guess if you're NVIDIA, it's almost by definition, you have to have the conviction. Like, what else are you doing, right? If you don't believe in it and you're making all the chips. So I don't know. So let me throw it to you. It's like, is it rational people making rational decisions that could be wrong, or is just completely irrational all the way around?
Well, I think, there's so much to dissect in this. I think to a certain extent, the reason we are struggling with this is I think we're struggling with this on two fronts. On one front, we all learned in like first or second grade math, right? Like certain numbers just have to add up or they're not right. And so that's the part that we struggle with so much. Like, hey, for example, like OpenAI does not have $300 billion, let alone they're like right now, there's no way to get to $300 billion if you do the math for them, unless of course,
right. We can make it worse. They have no money. They make negative money. So that's what's more strange about it.
So let's just say they have zero money. They just signed a contract for $300 billion. And there's one way they could get $300 billion, which is to go borrow $300 billion or take it as equity from somebody and then give it to Oracle, right? Like that's one way of doing it. The other, so that's the part where we all sort of are like, in disbelief of like, well, how does this work? And then like, for example, how does Oracle get to like account for that, even though it's not money that's come in, but Wall Street seems to be like, well, we want to give you credit for that. So your stock can go up like an insane amount of like, that part doesn't make any sense. That's all like stuff we learned in first and second grade. The part that seems to be what these guys are doing is they basically looked at, the Uber business model, which was the best thing you can do is anything possible to whatever you have to do to go win a market, right? Essentially what Uber did. Like laws didn't matter. The amount of funding they took didn't matter. The way that they, changed all the rules for everybody with cars. They would come out with crazy announcements about like owning their own fleet of cars, whatever it was. But it was basically the playbook that Silicon Valley adopted, which was there are only winner take all markets. And that seems to be sort of, the mindset that all these guys have, of which if it is winner take all, there is only going to be one or two winners. There's going to be like a hardware winner and there's going to be a software winner, i.e. Intel and Microsoft back in the day. But they all think they're going to be big winners because, the game right now is being played by like 5 or 6, ultra billionaires. So that's the part that I don't think most of us can kind of wrap our heads around because it doesn't seem like normal sort of market competition and market economics. But if you're playing there is only one outcome and it's winner take all, then these things make all sorts of sense, right?
And I do think the Uber is probably the most recent and best example of it. I'm going to say it worked out. I'm going to say they raised something like $20 billion. And today, looking at the stock market, they're worth $200 billion. So,
right.
So it seemed like in, I Lyft, whose second is like significantly smaller. So
yeah,
I think in the case of Uber, we'd be like, it was I don't know, tenuous there for a while.
Yeah,
but I think it did work out.
Yeah, and the way Uber ultimately sort of won was the first phase of what they did crushed the taxi market, right? Like it destroyed, broke the economic, which was fine. Like they disrupted the economics, and technology helped do that, and all this sort of stuff. And then the second piece of it was they kept their losses so high for so long that they basically survived, out-survived Lyft. And now that Lyft, doesn't have the capital to do it and people don't want to invest in them anymore, now Uber's like, oh, well, now I can go back to doing sort of rational stuff, which is, aren't their prices like 4 or 5x what they used to be? I mean, like their pricing is significantly higher. Yeah, whatever the number is. So again, that is an approach you can take. It is risky. Right now, it doesn't feel like the AI companies are necessarily like breaking as many laws or sort of putting their nose up to as many laws as Uber did, because they would go into places that you weren't allowed to do this stuff, and they would just be like, here's giving you the finger, and I'm just going to do this. This seems more like they're getting into a different sort of thing as far as laws go, where they're just like, well, we're just sort of tied up with the government, and we're going to hope that they're going to be on our side too. So yeah, it is a weird, like it doesn't fit any sort of like normal business school sort of stuff. But it's an interesting approach. I think the flip side of it is, so that's us looking at it from like an Oracle perspective and looking at it from an OpenAI perspective. The flip side of it is NVIDIA is doing exactly what you guys talked about on Software Defined Talk for like 2 years during the pandemic with Zoom. Like, hey, you are worth so much money right now. What are you going to do with it? And it felt like Zoom did basically nothing. And NVIDIA's like, oh, no, I'm going to build every moat I can possibly build, whether it's investing, giving the money to the guys who will then turn around and buy my product, or I'm going to invest in Intel like they did this past week, or whatever it is. It feels like they are running the Software Defined Talk playbook, which is if you have obscene amounts of money, then you should be putting it to work, not sort of sitting on the sidelines hoping your one business model works, which I applaud them for that.
Yeah, no, I agree. They have a lot of chips and they're willing to spend them. And I think, it's interesting, I think, for all of us that are in at this point, if you have a 401k, you're in an index fund, it's sort of like we've all kind of found ourselves like, it turns out we're all betting on this, it's like, cause that's where all the gains are. So even if you think like I'm diversified, I'm just in SPY or whatever. Well, not really. You're in this as well. And I think where we found ourselves, and I guess this is what NVIDIA is doing, is like, I like this idea from economics, like final demand, right? And that the idea of just is simply, it's sort of like at some point, someone has to buy it and use it, like Netflix. At some point, Netflix buys all this technology, pays all these creators, they make movies, but like you and I pay a subscription and we consume a film or a TV show, right?
Right.
And that's the final demand. We're not reselling anything. That's what we're doing. And I think that's where we sit with OpenAI. It's like, okay, they've got all these users. They have all this money coming in, but no one has figured out like, what's the final demand? Like, what is it? And I know we've been talking about this a little bit, certainly on Software Defined Talk, maybe a little bit on your show as well. It's like, they're going to do some type of advertising thing. In fact, I think we just saw recently that they're out there hiring not only just another CEO of products, but as I guess a VP of the advertising product inside of OpenAI. And so that's going to be like whether we like it or not, I feel like we're all in on like, we kind of need this advertising product to work because they have to start making money at some point to like pay for Oracle and to, if you will, to grow into this valuation. And if they don't, if everyone's like, advertising doesn't work at all, like not only are they going to do poorly, but the stock market is going to do very poorly and we're all going to be very sad. So I think that's what it is. We're all searching. We're all hoping OpenAI finds that final demand for us.
Yeah, it's basically. Everybody is betting on NVIDIA. And I distinctly remember when this happened during the internet era, because I worked for Cisco, and I'd be in an airport or something, and people would be like, "Oh, what do you do?" Or I'd be wearing a Cisco shirt, and they would go, "Oh yeah, got you in my 401k." And for a while, you were like, "This is awesome," until the stock bottomed out, and then you were like, "I'm not wearing those clothes out in public. I don't really want to." I don't want to hear it from people because I ruined their 401k. So yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, before we move on, we should give a quick shout out to another person, another company that actually released something that looks like the search for final demand. It's of course our friends at Facebook, or Meta, as they're known. They released the Vibes app this week. What a fantastic name! First of all, why did we not do that? I guess which is really just a twist on their Meta, their chatbot. But what they've done, which is interesting, and I don't know, certainly Ben Thompson and others are very excited by it, but it is essentially, if you think of it, it's TikTok, but every video is AI generated, right? Everything is generated. So you go in there and you can just watch AI generated videos of just like all this stuff. So if you think about it, that's that. So the product is obvious. If everyone wants to just watch AI generated videos and there's like a ton of demand, then so of course Meta will just roll ads into it. So it's like, so we kind of went from like Twitter and social media, then we went to like YouTube, then we got to TikToks, which is like, the user generated stuff. And now it's just like, we're just going full AI. It's like, I'm just going to serve you up videos that grab your attention and they can put ads in it. And maybe that is both a bleak future for humanity, but it also probably is a way that like you make a lot of money. So that's the latest thing I've seen, the latest attempt, if you will, to capture some type of final demand.
Yeah. It is. You do got to wonder if, kind of going back to the thing that we talk about sometimes, the concept of TAM, like total addressable market. Like you do got to wonder if, like, for example, if you're the biz dev guy or the gal from OpenAI, right? It seems like you're doing a, 9, 10, 12 figure deal like every other week. When the question of TAM comes up, you just go, yes. Yeah. You just go, yeah, there is one.
I think
it's the whole world all the time.
I think you put 3, but I would put 3 bubbles on there. I'd be like, well, search, and that would just be like all the Google money. So that's like $350 billion a year. Then you would put the Facebook stuff on there and TikTok and all that, and be like, whatever. That's probably another $200 billion. Yeah. And then maybe something like, back to your Uber thing, self-driving cars, and just be like, yeah, we add all this up.
Something else, yeah.
This is like $1 trillion of revenue, of profit, right? If we got all of these. And then be like, any other questions? Because those are the kind of tangible. And I also like, when we're finally I feel like we're getting closer. We're getting away from the god awful, I don't want to pick on Google, but it feels like it's always like, oh, let me show you how to make a restaurant reservation. It's like, dude, no, we're not making $500 million making restaurant reservations. Like, no, go ahead.
No, but OpenAI came out with I forget what the name of it was. I'll have to look it up because I just saw it today. Like, they came out with a thing that was like, yeah, you're going to plug your calendar in and we will help you make restaurant reservations.
Yeah, I saw that one. I think that was in here. And I'm just like, I don't want any of this. And I also don't think they're huge businesses now. But if you told me, it's like, well, we're just going to feed people like weird videos they want to watch and it drives a lot of attention and we're going to shove ads in it. And like, maybe I'm not like happy society has chosen that, but I'm like, I get it. Yeah. People like to waste time on their phones just watching stuff. And I'm like, makes sense to me. Or like, so I don't know. We're just getting closer to like, if you will, it's maybe it almost like creeps us out a little bit. It's like, is this really what we want? But it also means that like, this is kind of what becomes really profitable on the internet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. As I look at the, because again, we could go through all sorts of news in here. I think one of the things that jumps out at me, and again, this sort of goes to, like you talked about, this sort of new world that we live in where everything is sort of driven by some algorithm, which is driven to sell. I'm looking through the cloud news stuff, and I feel like if I went back a year or so, or maybe a year and a half or so ago, like we had a bunch of what I would call sort of regular everyday stuff in cloud news and in AI news. And there was stuff that was, it ended with a number that was a 7-digit number. It was a millions number. There is not one story in here. Not one. Okay, there's one. There's one about a company that got funding for an enterprise MCP gateway. Every other one of them is $1 billion, and in many cases, tens or hundreds of billions of dollar thing. And I wonder if, because this is the stuff that gets sort of, served up to us, because again, it gets aggregated and blah, blah, like, how hard is it to be anything little at this point in time? The greatest idea in the world doesn't surface out of any of this stuff. I mean, Tesla bought, or SpaceX bought EchoStar Spectrum to get into the mobile device, $20 billion. Databricks, another $1 billion funding. Anthropic, another round of funding. Like, it's insane, the numbers that we're talking about. I think it skews everything that we're doing, because it, in essence, takes 99% of what everybody does day in and day out, and it just makes it completely irrelevant. Which is, I mean, like, we're not even talking about it. It's not on the show, sort of lineup at all. And I'm like, stuff got done. There was things that got done. I'm sure AWS had 20 announcements this past week. None of them made this last month. Not a thing. Weird.
Yeah, no, well, I think you just kind of, I think another way to say it is, like, I think we just forget how big the opportunity for any type of internet scale business is. I mean, there's billions of people, billions of dollars, whether it's attention, whether it's advertising, whether it's subscriptions, whether it's self-driving cars. It's like, it is just like the world, these massive markets open up, and they become multi-billion-dollar markets. So the fact that, like, someone announced that maybe like they have a SaaS service and it makes out $20 million annually, and that's probably like a great little business, but it's just, it just doesn't rise to the level of like being big news anymore. And I think that's the world right now. I guess it is. It's just trying to, like, everything is built to scale, right? And that's what the whole world is trying to do. It's not like you don't want to just dominate one small industry. It's, you want to, like, do everything across the entire internet. You want to be worth billions of dollars. So I don't know, for better or for worse, I guess that's where we find ourselves.
Yeah, I guess. I do remember a time not too long ago when the companies that would do this, that would be like, hey, I'm going to take on the next big giant world problem, they actually had solved one giant world problem first at a very profitable level. There are no companies also on this list that have done any of, like, Oracle, taking on AI at a profitable level. Nope, haven't done that yet. OpenAI, anything, not profitable yet. The only one profitable is NVIDIA, and that's just because the rest of them aren't profitable, and it is.
Well, it's interesting on the subject of cloud specifically. For the longest time, we do this show and we talk about how, well, AWS is still number one. They're great. Yeah. They're doing great. And obviously to the large extent, that's still true today. But what is interesting is, like, if you will, the amount of revenue or the need kind of switches from, like, let's say, traditional enterprises moving to the cloud and running traditional workloads to, actually, the biggest consumer is really just a few giant AI companies, right? And, like, the fact that and this is maybe the advantage for Oracle or someone else, like, the fact that, like, you just do that, like, you just provide, if you will, like, GPU services at scale, like, that business is so big that it starts to actually make the classic, which is funny to even say, the classical cloud business seems small, right? So, like, this is always kind of the thing with Amazon. It's like, yeah, they do everything, but, like, if you just need one thing and you just want one thing done all the time, it's like, maybe that's the future, right? The future is just like these massive GPU farms, and that's going to be a huge part of the business going forward. And I guess by default, that's what Oracle's bet on.
Yeah, they have. They've bet on it, and OpenAI has bet on it like 7 or 8 different ways. It's sort of hard to keep up with how many of these are the same thing. Like, how much of this Oracle stuff is Stargate? How much of it is not Stargate? How much of is it of the NVIDIA stuff investing in it? It's interesting. Let's hit on a couple of the things that are actually in here that might be worth digging into. So, Intel, I can't believe how many times we've talked about Intel this year. I feel just unbelievable. But so Intel gets a new, and I think this is official because I do feel like there's a lot of things that are being announced aren't official yet. But Intel getting a $5 billion round of funding from NVIDIA. Feels like part of it is NVIDIA trying to lock up Intel somewhat to sort of block ARM, right? They're trying to do some, combined CPU, GPU types of stuff. I know they mentioned some desktop stuff in there. I don't know if that's really what they want to go after, but there's that. And then it does also feel like the funding piece of it feels like something that they were NVIDIA was encouraged to do to sort of jumpstart Intel's foundry business, right? At least create a certain amount of demand that they could then go to build somebody else's chips, which, we also saw a little bit, and I didn't get a chance to get it in the show notes. I'll put it in. Apparently, Intel's in talks with Apple with some stuff as well,
Correct.
Which again also feels like, hey, we'd like to encourage you to go do this thing that the U.S. government is sort of funding, which, whether people like it or not, does feel like a way of, building up Intel. I mean, Intel's problem is very simple. They don't have anybody that trusts them to be a foundry. And unless somebody, Ben Thompson's made that clear. And I think I think even Intel's CEO has said it on earnings, like nobody wants to use our foundry. This feels like a way of doing that, even though these numbers, they're $5 billion or whatever, like still don't feel big enough. I mean, I guess, like, I think this is a real thing to track. But again, it sort of takes Intel completely out of the business of doing the thing they did forever, which was world-class engineering, and now just gets them into, number 2 in the TSMC business, which is a weird. I mean, from 2 years ago, us talking about maybe Gelsinger pulls this out to this seems like their future, which is unusual.
Yeah, no, I would go even further. I'd say Intel seems to now be on the too big to fail list, right? The United States has decided that we need to have some type of U.S.-based foundry fabrication facilities. And it seems like, I think the U.S. government's taken, a 10% stake in them already? I think to your point earlier, I think I would go even further. It's not like the CEO mentioned it. He basically said on the earnings call, it's like, we will not build out the 14A process unless people are going to pay us. And then it was like, oh, well, then NVIDIA made an announcement. Now it sounds like Apple's on the verge of an announcement. And you get I mean, I don't even know if they have to be secret about it. You just get the sense of like, there was a phone call from the White House to several large chip companies like, everyone is in for $5 billion. Okay. Yep. Everybody, it's called a tax, call it whatever you want. We need to keep this company going. It's a national security issue. And so, small for NVIDIA and for Apple, small price to pay, right? It's just it is what it is. So I don't know. And I guess it's sort of like, Ben Thompson's covered extensively. I guess it's like, what is the phrase? It's the worst, it's the wrong decision except for everything else, right? There are really no right decisions here. So it's just like, you just pick the least bad, which is like, okay, fair enough.
Well, I mean, the other part of it is I'm surprised if it is sort of a wink, wink, nod, nod encouragement, which I'm sure it is, and it is what it is. Like, I'm surprised it's not bigger. And I'm sort of surprised, like the U.S. government's not like, well, I'm sort of in for 10 billion and the way that rich people do. So, the way they do it, like charity events, like, well, if I'm in for 10 billion, you should be willing to reach in your wallet. I mean, because the people they're asking are like NVIDIA, what are they worth? 4 trillion now. Apple, worth 3 trillion. Like, you guys should be in for at least 10 billion. Like this $5 billion, $2 billion stuff seems like, somebody, if they're going to kind of encourage them, they need to be better at encouraging them, at least up to the level that they've done.
I like your annual. It's almost, I think we should view this more like an annual fundraiser. It's like, hey, this is just to kick off the fundraising season. This is just the beginning deal. It's okay. Everybody's got $5 billion. You probably got that in your wallet today, but don't worry. There's going to be a big gala event later this year. There's going to be a founders club. So it wouldn't shock me in like 6 to 12 months. There's like a bigger deal, more money, more stuff behind it. So, it seems like it'll be an ongoing thing for the foreseeable future.
Right. Well, the question becomes like, how many more people can kind of pony that much up, though? I mean, I guess it could be like Broadcom, which seems weird because they sort of compete directly with Intel. I guess it could be Qualcomm. It basically becomes the list of everybody that Intel doesn't, has competed against or tried to destroy in the past that is going to do this. Because, I mean, you could take on, tons of the Ford and General Motors and the automotives, or you could take on the Raytheons or whatever. But like, I don't know that their numbers are as big as those would be.
Well, I think if we're just putting together a list of top donors, almost back to your metaphor here, it's just like, we just be like, well, listen, I don't know. Somebody call Bezos. Aren't they making chips? I think they're good for 5 or 10. What about Satya Nadella? Like, I think they're making their own chips too. Like, they're in for some. Google, don't they have that TPU thing going? I think they're going to be in too. So it's like, by the time we finish, like, I think we can get most people in, and we can make sure they're all funding at the appropriate level. I don't think it'll be that hard.
Yeah, you're right. Now that I think about it, you get Penn and Teller out there, running the show. They could get to $100 billion probably pretty quickly. That's floating around. I want to go back to the AI side of things a little bit. All of this news, all this NVIDIA news, OpenAI news, Oracle news, all this news, and somehow with a company that has a pretty good product, pretty good technology, smart people, does anybody at Anthropic PR ever get any good news? I mean, no good news ever comes out of Anthropic. They're settling lawsuits. Their CEO is all excited about people losing their job. He says stupid stuff every month at some conference. Like, why? Like, how has Anthropic, who most people would look at and go, probably the second best model that's out there, since they're, a bunch of ex OpenAI people and ex Google people. Like, how can they never get any positive PR? I don't understand that to save my life.
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I guess, the history would tell us that Anthropic was sort of the engineers that got mad or that were unhappy with OpenAI and left. And they took an engineering mindset to building the problem, which is not wrong, but they do not seem nearly as skilled at like making deals, building narratives, just being on message, right? They seem like they kind of, but then they kick out really good products. Like, I've talked a lot about Claude Code, right? I think they sort of kickstarted that whole area. And so they have a lot of good ideas. I just think their natural skills are build stuff, not necessarily market it, position it, and if you will, go figure it out. And I do think they're sort of like, I don't know, I almost feel like they're the OpenAI fail safe. Like we talked about NVIDIA, but it's like, because every time we talk about OpenAI, we didn't even get into like, they're still a nonprofit. They really need to go public because that's how you would get all this money, but they can't go public. It's just like the sea of confusion over there. So it's always like, well, if OpenAI completely burns itself to the ground, it's like, at least we have Anthropic. We can, they have the technology. They may not know what they're doing, but they have lots of good technology. So, and I don't know. And, and I guess the thing about their message, if we were to credit them, which would be a weird word to use here, is that their CEO has right from the, I guess it's Dalio, or however you say his name.
Dario,
he has been basically consistent that like, this is going to replace like everyone's job. Right. And I think maybe in some ways their lack of messaging and lack of playing in these other worlds is like, no, we're going to replace every single job. And if you really did believe that, then like, what does it matter if there's advertising? If I replace every human worker, right? Like everybody is now replaced and the AI is just building on top of itself. And we're living in this world of where everything is just done from us. Yeah. Building an advertising product doesn't seem nearly as important. So I think maybe it's just that their mindset is like, that's where they're going to like AGI, and who knows? I mean, it's always, I think the thing we do know is it's always 18 months away, right? It's kind of like, I guess we should almost add this as a corollary to our early innings joke. It's like, it's always early innings in cloud and we're just 18 months away from AGI, right? No matter what. So it's like, what does that even mean?
I know. Yeah. I think you're right. I think from what I've heard, the Anthropic folks are the ones who are the most dead set that they're building God. And that's, like everything else doesn't matter. They are building, they are building essentially this, at this point, super intelligence or quantum intelligence or whatever, a big fancy word is like that. And yeah, they don't, and you do have to wonder though, like at some point they must just have like a sign, like if you're the Dario guy, you must just have like a sign or something around the office. It just says like, Azure and AWS call us every day. At some point, they're going to buy us because they have to, because they need to own a model. Because at this point, like Azure doesn't necessarily have a tie to OpenAI anymore. We know AWS doesn't necessarily control their destiny in terms of a model that's competitive. Like, he must sort of sit back and be like, those guys both call me once a week. Once a week I go have dinner with their biz dev folks. I'm not worried about this. Like if it doesn't, if we can't invent super intelligence or whatever it is, like they're gonna write us a big check and bail us out of this thing. So don't worry about it. I don't know. It is interesting with those guys. And I don't know, maybe it's just as simple as Claude's a weird name for your product and people can't quite wrap their head around it.
I would even further. I always think like the font when I use Claude and I'm like typing in the font, I'm always like this. It has like a Comic Sans kind of feel. I'm always like, maybe they just changed the font on their UI. I'd feel better about it.
Are you worried about Ed Zitron burning out his 15 minutes of fame? It feels like the last 2 weeks he has gotten a lot of spotlights. A lot of other people are writing about him. He's starting to get a little bit out there. Here's what I worry about, and I don't worry about him so much because there's always going to be angry people and people that are naysayers. Like what did you ever see the movie The Big Short?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So you had what was the guy's name? Michael
Berry, right? Yeah.
Right. He was sort of the Ed Zitron of this age, except he was, betting against, but he was the one who was like, I'm going to figure out a way to invent a vehicle to bet against the housing market. I want to know, does Ed have a way of betting against the AI market other than shorting NVIDIA? Because there doesn't really feel like, I mean, I guess you could short NVIDIA, Broadcom, I guess you could build a little bit of a bundle there, but you can't short OpenAI. There doesn't feel like there's that many vehicles that cover the entire market to bet against AI. I guess you could sort of short, QQQ or something like that, but that feels like a bet that, who has enough capital to sort of burn through that? Because it doesn't have a timeline like the mortgages do. I'm curious, beyond just being, the guy who said, hey, I picked against the market. Like, what does he get out of this? Does he get a book? What comes out of this thing that he would benefit from?
Well, it's a good question. I guess, a couple things I think of that come to mind when you say that. It's like, one, it's like we're human beings. We like narrative. So in some ways, Ed has become like the face of the bubble. Like we ask this question all the time on this podcast and others. It's like, is it a bubble? What's going to happen? And Ed is clearly the person that we can point to is like, yeah, he says there's a bubble, and he's going to write every single day. He puts out some information about that's often compelling. He's like this thing we talked about at the top of the show. He's like, this is all round trip revenue. This is what happened during the mortgage crisis, right? This is what happened in other places. Like, you guys don't see it. I'm telling you, it's going to happen, right? Kind of like Michael, I think it's Burry. Correct myself from the thing. And so I think for him, I think it's part of it's like, I think he's from a journalistic point of view. He's like, I am doing the work. I'm telling you all this is going to happen. I'm a journalist. I want people to know about my reporting. They want to know about what I'm finding out. And I think he looks at a lot of the people, I'm going to be generous in the way I say it. To be generous of his description, I think he would say a lot of these people are not so forthcoming with information. They're kind of disingenuous in the way that they explain what they're doing, right? I think, but I think he would use some even harsher words to describe a lot of the people in OpenAI. So I think one of it, I think it's just a journalistic integrity kind of thing. Two, I think we all need someone to be like, well, who's the opposite side? Like, if we're cheering for Alabama, who's the Auburn? Like, who's the other team? So he's definitely representing it. And then I think from a financial perspective, I don't know. I don't think it's I guess we can debate what is the most profitable trade if things go, if it doesn't go well, if OpenAI sort of flames out. But I got to be honest, I think just shorting your favorite index fund is probably as good as anything. It's all gonna go down. If we go back to, the NASDAQ, kind of when probably you and I got in our career, I think the NASDAQ was 5,000 and then it went to 2,000, right? So it's maybe it didn't go to zero, but if you were smart enough to short all that, you made quite a bit of money. So I think there are plenty of, and of course too, there's other ways to do it. You can start to look at power companies and, all the kind of ancillary companies, data center companies, all these people that have these run ups because they're kind of, if you will, the picks and shovels providers, all of them are going to lose a ton of money as well. Or Oracle, maybe Oracle, it's as easy as Oracle, right? It's short because Oracle's had a huge run up. So all of that together, I think is sort of if you believe it, if you're betting against it, that makes sense. And it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's sort of I think I think other people would say it's completely irrational, what NVIDIA is doing, but I think you articulated it perfectly. It's NVIDIA has all this money. It's they double down. They're in the casino. They're up so much money. They're let's just keep putting bets out. They could hit. And it's it seems like a rational choice, which is often the reason that we all get in trouble is these aren't irrational people. It's not crazy to think OpenAI could create a Google, Facebook type business. I don't think that's unreasonable. Now, will it happen? I don't know. But Ed is here to tell us it is definitely not going to happen. And he has told us many times that he will be, when it does happen, he will be the person to tell us, I told you so. So we won't need a Michael Lewis movie. We'll just go to Ed Zitron directly and be like, okay, you were right. You got it. The rest of us, we missed it. Yeah.
Yeah. If he's smart and he looks at the past, he goes, I need to have a book and a script ready to go for if this thing, happens and I can get, I can get these people lined up. I can get Brad Pitt to play whatever role he's going to play. And I can get, Steve Carell to play whatever role. It's just, the other question I have about this beyond the, what could you short if you were in the Ed Zitron camp is at some point, as we've talked about, being the product manager of OpenAI or of NVIDIA, great, every quarter, everything sells out, all that sort of stuff. I do sort of wonder, because everything they build right now and the way they think about stuff it feels like it's entirely based. It feels like on one hand, it's based on the principle that, Jensen always has, which is the only good AI is the absolute best AI, the most performant, the most, sort of best, biggest of everything. And he's got to be smart enough to, he's been around as long as we have. He's lived through enough markets in which you're no, the biggest and best, the most expensive, the largest, the whatever, doesn't win in the long term, doesn't win at scale. But he's got to be sitting there going, yeah, but the thing to remember is right now we're not doing anything at scale. Like we don't have power at scale. We don't have data center space at scale. We don't have manufacturing at scale. Like all those things that if they were at scale, I would probably have to build a GPU that's like 1/10 the price of what I do right now, but that would be fine because I would, limit the function. Like I wonder if they have a roadmap that assumes that, or if it's like, yeah, I have a roadmap, I have a thought for a roadmap of that, but it's really just, changing the tape out of what we do, because that's not going to happen because I know what the data center build out is going to look like. And I know what the power build out is, and I don't have to do that for 10 years. Like I you know what I mean? Like I don't know that there's any reason for them to try and drive the price in the market down to a lower price point, to increase adoption, because they're like, we are not in any way at scale at this point. No matter what all these big numbers come out, like we're not at like internet scale with this stuff, the way the advertising is, which is like you can get tons of data center space and you can get super cheap chips and you can do all that sort of like that stuff doesn't really exist for AI. We just are throwing a lot of money at it.
Well, I would even say, Jensen, as rich and successful as is, at the end of the day, he doesn't really know any more than we know. But kind of back to this final demand thing, because I think if a business started to throw off a tremendous amount of cash, right, then that will start to focus the market. Be like, how do we optimize that business? Because that business will naturally start to do it. Like, think of TikTok, right? It's like at first, or YouTube, even better. It's like at first, it's like, wow, it's way too complicated to put video over the internet. The bandwidth is way too expensive. But then people figured out, oh, people love it, and all the costs. Like Google has figured that out. And now it's like a hugely profitable business. And I think that's kind of like, so it's interesting. It's like, it's great that Jensen Huang is smart enough to be like, you know what? I believe OpenAI is the next, multi-trillion-dollar thing. But what he doesn't say is like what they're going to do, because he doesn't know either, right? Because if he did know, if he was like, oh, the thing, like the Vibes app, let's just use that example. It's like, actually, what people want is the Vibes app. And that's going to be the next, because he would either go buy that or build that himself. So he's just like us. And I think until such time, he's just a cheerleader he's your ultimate, we should bring this back to college football. He's your ultimate booster. He's the T. Boone Pickens or the Phil Knight supporting the team. He's like, guys, I have all the money. We're going to win. I'm just going to keep cheering you on and giving you money. They don't play the game. They don't know either. Right. And I think that's where he's kind of found himself, is like, he just has to be the cheerleader, keep investing. And he just believes eventually in his world, the national championship will be like, I'm going to fund the next multi-trillion-dollar consumer application company. And I'm going to tell everyone I was right. Or as we see in college football, I'm going to spend a tremendous amount of money and lose in the playoffs and be sad. So either outcome is possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I think if we summarize this last month, there was a lot of noise, a lot of really big numbers. We're not really sure if any of it's really real or if it'll ever really come to fruition, but at least people are making big swings. They're making big bets. And I guess, as far as it goes for commentary, that's a good thing for us. So, all right, man. Well, thank you for the time as always. Thanks for coming on. We are getting into the real part of the football season. I think by the time next month, we will have a sense of like who's a contender and who's a pretender, as they like to say. So we'll be able to follow up on that. I'm not sure what'll happen in cloud and AI, but we know that'll happen in college football because it's a defined schedule. So folks, with that, we're going to wrap it up and we will talk to you next week. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.